The Department of Health is planning to make it compulsory for all restaurants to put calorie counts on menus in England. The government says the plan could help tackle child obesity and make people more aware of what they're eating. Well, here are 5 different foods: pizza, chicken korma, sushi, seafood pasta and chocolate soufflé. Now, out of all of these, which do you think has the most calories? Well, a whole pizza is the correct answer, of course. But consider the competitors. That sushi actually has more calories than the chocolate soufflé. So, in a moment, we're going to be speaking to a registered dietitian, Nichola Ludlam-Raine. But first, let's talk to restaurateur Tim Wood at his establishment, the Fat Loaf in Sale. Thank you very much for joining us in the middle of what must, I'm sure, be a very busy evening for you.
Yeah, it is tonight, yeah.
What do you make of this idea?
Well, I was only informed about it earlier today, and I saw it. But I mean, if it's something that helps out, then fine. But I don't know how we would go on as a restaurant, independent restaurant that changes the menu quite frequently for the menu that changes quite frequently. How would we get that across to the customers and the diet? You know, having to employ nutritionists all the time. You know, how much would that cost us? How much would that affect us? Really, I suppose.
So you'd have to go through every single dish and work out what the ingredients were and exactly how the calories were. Presumably no one on your staff is going to have the know-how to do that.
Well, yeah, no, we don't have the know-how, and also the chefs, obviously, we obviously make our own burgers, etc. So they might be adding another 10 grams on the burger sometimes, and a little bit less. We do weigh everything out when we're making the burger, but it would obviously impact on, if they gave an extra 10 grams, that would impact on what the calorie intake would be as well.
Do you think that if this information was included on menus, it would change your customers' habits and the choices that they make? Maybe they'd avoid the sticky toffee pudding and go for a bowl of strawberries instead?
No, maybe, but then I think people do still go out to a restaurant for a nice meal and to actually unwind, relax and have what they want. It's not an everyday treat, but you know, we'd like people to come to us, and we have a lot of regular customers that come to us once every week, once every 2 weeks. But when they do come out, they want to relax and enjoy what they're eating, and hopefully they've geared up for that night out for the rest of the day and watch what they've been doing during the day, knowing they're going out and thinking about that sticky toffee pudding, which whenever they just think about having the ice cream or a coffee, they generally end up having anyway.
OK, Tim Wood, thank you very much indeed for joining us. I'll let you get back to your restaurant and serving those customers unencumbered by calorie counting each dish. Thank you very much for joining us. Let's talk now to the registered dietitian, Nichola Ludlam-Raine. Thank you very much indeed for talking to us. Do you think this is a good idea to tackle obesity?
In theory, it sounds like a great idea, but from the current evidence that we've got, it's actually unclear if putting calories on menus actually makes any difference to the consumer, and it could actually increase the risk of binge eating and unhealthy weight control behaviours. So we have to ask the question, how many people actually understand what calories are? Are they aware how many calories that they're having at other meals? So I'm a bit dubious, really, and I think the fast food chains that are doing it at the moment online, I think that's great, but for small restaurants and cafes, I think it's unfeasible, it's too costly, and like he just said, the menus are changing all the time, so how accurate would it really be?
And as we were mentioning just a few minutes ago, for example, your chocolate soufflé may actually have fewer calories than your sushi, but presumably as a dietitian you would recommend that I eat the sushi rather than the chocolate soufflé if that's what I'm going to have for my lunch.
Yeah, you've got it spot on. Calories are not king for health, and what matters more is what you're eating and then the quantity second of all. So with the sushi, you're going to be getting some protein, some carbohydrate and healthy fats. From the souffle, there's added sugar there, and of course having added sugar is okay, you know, in moderation. It's the whole foods that we want to be focusing on. So I think the message is, getting people to focus on what they're eating the majority of the time, having a plant-focused diet, and just enjoying yourself. If you only go out, once a month or once a week, you can pretty much have what you want. Those extra calories aren't going to make a big difference in the grand scheme.
And as you mentioned at the beginning, there is also, isn't there, this concern that particularly perhaps people who may be prone to eating disorders, that this can bring back this whole focus on exactly what is this going to do to my body? Can I possibly have that chocolate pudding at the end of my meal? There is a bit of a danger there, isn't it, that it could make life more difficult for people who have problems in this area?
You're exactly right. The eating disorder charity Beat aren't too happy about it. As I said before, it could increase the risk of binge eating, but also I think it could increase our obsessive nature and having an over focus on calories when really we don't need to calorie count. If we're in tune with our hunger and fullness regulations and signals, then you don't need to count calories. So yeah, I completely agree. And if say, for example, somebody goes out for a meal and they forego their pudding, they don't have it, what happens then when they get home? Do they feel deprived? Do they feel low in mood because they haven't been able to enjoy it? And do they end up binge eating later on anyway?
OK, Nichola Ludlam-Raine, thank you very much indeed for talking to us.